Everyone, thanks so much for joining us today for another Smith.ai Masters Series. I'm Maddy Martin. I'm the VP of Marketing here at Smith.ai. We are a 24/7 virtual receptionist service for calls, chats, texts, and Facebook messages. We do a lot more than answer calls and chats. We do intake screening and scheduling, and that's going to be super relevant in today's conversation. We've got Karlie Morien here from Directive Consulting, and she is going to be sharing how to best qualify your leads for conversion to improve your conversion rate effectiveness, understanding when it comes to qualifying leads, why quality always reigns over quantity, and how understanding how to convert those quality leads into closed won business can be improved as a place where companies often get stuck. So without further ado, before we get into the topic at hand, and today, folks, we're just going to do a live Q&A. There's not a formal slide deck. We're going to have a discussion, and please feel free to ask questions and comment with your own best practices. Karlie, if you could just share a little bit about your background and why you're really passionate about this subject.
Oh yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you, Maddy, for having me on. I have not done a webinar in some time, so really exciting for me. Really happy to be here with you. So my background, as Maddy said, I'm actually the VP of Growth over at Directive Consulting. We are a digital performance marketing agency specializing in working with B2B SaaS clients. My background is actually in sales development, building sales development teams. If you're not familiar, basically sales development reps are lead gen reps, whether they're taking inbound leads that come in and helping to qualify, which of course is a key part of our conversation today, or outbound prospecting and qualifying, kind of need to have double the expertise in that kind of role. My background is in building those kinds of teams. So I've worked at different SaaS companies to stand those teams up. So me personally, I also started my career as an SDR in SaaS sales. So it's really important for me to, help my team understand, to your point, how do we take those leads and get them to revenue? You could have 1,000 leads come in a day, but if they're not the right leads, it doesn't matter because they're not going to turn over into revenue. So I'm very passionate about this, and I've seen lead qualification evolve quite a bit over the past few years, really starting more with the demographic information side of things, excuse me. So, what kind of company, what industry, how many employees, how much revenue, but also then adding in the layer of, is this the right persona? Are they in a buying cycle? What actually are they looking for? And does that match what your product does? And really, honing in on those factors, as well as taking into account demographic information. Those coupled together, I think, can really help propel those leads to conversion.
Awesome. Well, there's so much to dig in here, and please, everyone, feel free to ask questions. I'd love to incorporate that. We can always follow up with them later. So, Karlie, I think with your experience in SaaS as an SDR, now an SDR leader, and way beyond that in sales and marketing, we think about conversion rate, and we think about it as a almost moment in time, as a stamp, or as writing in stone, like, oh, it's a 50 or 70% conversion rate. Well, from what point to what point? Like, where's the starting point where you start that timer, and then where's the ending point? Oftentimes that's a little bit easier to figure out. You've got a closed one client, you've got money on the books, but sometimes it's a little bit harder if you have a money back guarantee, or if you have an early period where people might roll off. That's also determining whether or not they're going to stick long term. What are some of the key factors here that help you determine what are we using as our start and end points for measurement, and what time frame?
That's a really, really good question. I think, so there's a couple factors to kind of unbox there. The first being the starting point. To me, that starting point is that lead actually coming in and entering into your funnel. Think about it almost in a website traffic sense, for example. You could have 100,000 people come to your site. if none of them take an action, or if they think that you are, I don't know, selling something that you're not selling, they don't understand, they aren't your persona, you're not showing up, in the search engine results, or you're not actually, making sure that your keyword strategy on your site, for example, actually represents what you do, that's the starting point. Are you getting the right people to actually come and engage with your site and take some sort of action? And we can even take it a step back from that. One exercise that I think is extremely important that I've done at a couple different companies is building a total addressable market. A total addressable market is basically mapping out how many companies, based on demographic information, would fit into your target market, that would be a customer or make sense for you to, be a client for you. At Directive, for example, we focus on SaaS. We've worked with over 200 SaaS companies. We have an understanding of the way, the SaaS lead to revenue model is, which is different than e-com, for example. So essentially what we did is we gathered data from a bunch of different third-party data sources. So think your ZoomInfos, your Seamless AI, your Crunchbase, and basically pull all of those companies, in our case, software companies. For a time, we were focused on the mid-market. So for us, that meant 100 to 1,000 employees. And we pulled it into a list. Now, we manually went through that list. Unfortunately, first-party data is not always accurate. But we really got down to, all right, here are about 4,000 companies that we want to be clients of ours. At that point, you can start to segment that list out into different tiers. So maybe, on the upper end of the revenue bucket, or, most recent funding or amount of employees, maybe it's 500 to 1,000 employees. That might be tier 1 because, maybe you've done some analysis, work with your marketing ops person to determine that that's a more valuable client for the business. Then maybe you have a tier 2 and even a tier 3. At that point, when your leads start to come in, you can determine, does this lead look like my total addressable market? And that can help with your lead scoring. Lead scoring typically done in a marketing automation system, Marketo, HubSpot, Pardot, Eloqua. And that you can set that up demographic and behavioral. And you're essentially, you're comparing. Does this lead look like who I want to be talking to? That's kind of the first step because, again, it doesn't matter if the right people aren't coming and engaging because they're never going to turn into revenue or value for your organization. And I can actually show a little bit of what our total addressable market looks like over here at Directive, just to give folks kind of an understanding and an overview of really, it's not some crazy thing. It's really just data. So I'm going to, will you let me share?
I have to give you screen sharing. There you go. Okay.
Thank you so much. Okay, here we go. Okay, so this is an example of what our total addressable market looks like. Now, this is just pulled together in Google Sheets. I have found and heard that there are some tools out there that can help you build this. Seamless AI, it's a data tool. I use it. I love it. They have a TAM section in their tool. So something to think about. I think there's some other tools that help you build this, but we basically just pulled the information into spreadsheets, and then through our, manual efforts, we did go through, we double checked each one of those, and then we took them and uploaded the lists by tier into Salesforce and created a Salesforce field that says tier 1, 2, or 3. So that way, when a lead comes in, we can either match it to a tier 1, 2, 3 account, or we can look at the demographic information to determine, okay, would this fall into tier 1, 2, or 3 criteria, or none of them? In which case, again, we want to look at how are people getting to our site? What are we promoting on our site? How are we grabbing folks that maybe aren't the right fit? And how can we change it to grab folks that are the right fit? So it doesn't have to be some, crazy special process. It's really just pulling data in and manually going through it, which can be tedious, but it's important to do. If you don't have a total addressable market, that's okay, but really consider it. It just really helps to drive focus in how you're marketing and also what you do with leads when they come through. If a lead comes through and you already identify that it's coming from a tier 1 account, well, that's already half qualified, right? You've already determined that's an account that you want to do business with. Now it's about figuring out who it is you're talking to. Do they have power to make any decision over what you're selling? Are they in an active buying cycle? Always a good thing. If not, question on the points of conversion. Where it ends is a really interesting question, because I think that can be really looked at in a couple of different ways. I think you have to identify, what does qualified mean to your org? And that can be, an opportunity. It could be a meeting set. It could be somebody talked to the lead and determined that they were qualified. So that's another thing to kind of think about when it comes to that ending point. Is it a sale or is it an opportunity creation?
Yeah, I mean, that makes a ton of sense to me. And from the consumer perspective, if you're a B2C company, if you're a financial advisor, law firm, you're in home services, you're going to do landscaping or plumbing or kitchen remodeling. There's also different segments even within those industries that might be easier to generate demand than others where there needs to be pre-existing demand. For example, you're probably not going to generate demand for someone to have an immigration or domestic issue or a criminal defense issue, or you're not going to create someone's DUI, right? Or a financial upset, whatever. Right. But for estate planning, there may be opportunity to generate demand. For financial planning, there might be opportunity to generate demand. And same thing even with, HVAC or home remodeling or landscaping, depending on the range of your services, especially if it's a wide range, you can generate demand for smaller or larger projects. But to identify those opportunities, it seems like the path might be a little bit different than going to Zoom Info. Maybe it's more about the demographic data. How many people who look and sound and behave like your existing ideal client base exists that you're not already working with, or that you could serve, but you're not quite driving that far or marketing in that area or establishing your network or advertising in that area. Is there anything that you would share there, Karlie? I don't know if you've experienced it in B2C, so I'm sort of putting you on the spot here.
No, that's okay. That's a good way. That's a good thing to think about. The other side, right? I'm talking about B2B. There is that B2C side. Mm-hmm. For B2C, what I'm thinking about on that end is, think, for example, a lawyer. Probably a couple times in our life, we're all going to need one, whether it is estate planning, hopefully not a DUI or something like that. But there are times when you're going to need a lawyer, and you want to show up when that need is there. And that need is not going to be as consistent.
Karlie, you're freezing a little bit for me. I don't know if it's my system.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. There you go.
Sorry about that. Internet, when you need it to work, it doesn't work, right? What I was saying was, showing up when showing up when you're needed, right?
Mhm.
Being top of mind on the B2C side. When I need a plumber, I know who I'm going to call because, they show up for me. I'm searching for them digitally. I can find them. For B2C, I think it's about maybe understanding the general buying cycle of your consumer and how often they might need you.
Yeah, and then how much are you willing to spend also to get in front of them? And I think that's one of the reasons why, on the B2C side in particular, we see a lot of search optimization so that you do show up when and if you're needed. And working at Your Mechanic previously to Smith.ai, where I led marketing, we knew that in car repair, much like a lot of the, home and professional services that we service at Smith.ai, if you need that service, you need it now. And you might be confronted with the existing market dynamics where someone on their commute back in the olden days of pre-COVID was driving to work and would pass by the Jiffy Lube every day. And you had to, at Your Mechanic, where we sent mechanics to your home or office to fix your car, we would have to get in front of them and win their business, convince them that we were more convenient, cheaper, whatever the case may be, instead of that place that they drove past every single day. Hence billboard advertising, hence radio advertising. Even when you don't have that, that client who's seeking, being in the mind of that client can help, again, facilitate that conversion rate at the end of the funnel because they've already planted your firm, your business in their mind as the one they're going to go with when that need arises. So have you already established that trust and presence for them?
And the consistency.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
That's
Being
the other
there,
key.
showing up. Mhm.
Surrounding in more ways than one. So when
Yes.
the need
Right.
is there, they know who to call.
So then how do you start framing whether that need exists or you're going to generate the demand or set a foundation, that imprint in their brain? How do you determine, if it's actually solving a problem for them and frankly, what problems you solve and in their own words? I find that can be a real challenge for businesses to get into the mind of the customer, whether they're a business or an individual.
Wow, that's a really great question. You're full of great questions. What I do is I do market research because, and I even do this in leadership roles. I'll reach out to clients or prospects and really just pick their brain. The market changes so frequently. We are in the midst of a global pandemic that has changed the way that business has been done for a lot of companies. So I want to talk to my potential clients, my prospects, and understand how they're making their decisions on a fairly frequent basis so that then I can look at my marketing, my messaging, my strategy, my approach, and make sure it matches. And it's crucial. And you can, there's consultants out here that can do that for you. Marketing folks can do that for you. Really, anybody, I feel like, can reach out to a client and have that kind of conversation, but it's crucial to then match to what you're positioning and messaging. And I find it opens up a lot of insight that maybe you're not thinking when you're just trying to think of the message you want to get out there, not so much if it resonates.
Yes. Yeah. And are you actively listening or are you more focused on sort of selling and pitching? I think that one of the things that we see most often, and Karlie, I'm sure you see this on the SDR and sales side of things too, the inexperienced salespeople. And I have to, give a lot of credit to everyone who's, owning or operating a business and just throwing themselves into that role because that's not what you went to school for. That's not the core expertise that you probably have. It's probably your business domain. But when you're in that place where you're owning a business and you have to put that hat on until you can afford a salesperson or an SDR, then you sort of like spend a lot of time working on your own speech, your own talking points, and less time listening because your nerves are in your own throat, right? You're trying to just like get through that conversation without embarrassing or totally botching it. And as a result, you don't often listen as much to the words that they're using, to the issues that they are bringing to your attention. So often asking questions in roles where you're not as experienced in sales can be one of the best strategies to build rapport and to get that data. One of the things that we also see, Karlie, is like on the chat side of things with the transcript, you can get a lot of information from what they actually write. So in a web chat, you might see they're asking a question that they asked on Google originally. They came to your website, they're looking for a kitchen remodel, right? And they want to know, do you use these materials, or what's your time frame, or is the cost this or that? Do you work in my area? You get the sense of also like what words do they use to describe the services that they need? Are they talking about remodeling or repair or renovation or redesign? Like those are also the words that you should parrot back to them. And then on your website, in your advertising, if that's the business that you want, if that client represents sort of your ideal new business, to find others who are speaking that way about services themselves.
That's a great point. You can also export that language and analyze it.
Yeah.
So how frequently are these words being used, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are there personas or titles that are speaking certain ways and others that are speaking other ways? And then to your point, how can you take that and layer that into your approach and messaging? And it might be a different message to different people. Your DUI clientele might be different than another clientele that you have, and you have to make sure you're speaking to, sometimes multiple sets of people as well, which is something to consider.
Yes, yeah, totally. And are you talking to someone who's the decision maker, or are they just doing research? Because it's really easy to create an entire database of people who are searching but don't buy, or who are sort of on contract to hunt down a service and they're not actually in-house. You think you have a contact and you don't. So often, asking, is there anyone else here who's going to be making this decision with you, is a really key question to ask, to make sure that, when we think about the conversion rate, like we also think about what are the inputs, what are the elements of that equation, right? So you've got one part of it, they seem ready, they're on fire for your business. But if they don't have the sign-off power to spend that money with you, it doesn't really matter unless they're the most convincing person in the world. So you really have to understand what are the dynamics, what's going to throw you for a loop, what's going to delay you, who do you need to bring to the table, and then how, because that can be the biggest gatekeeping element that happens. Like, how great is your relationship with that person, and are they going to bring you to the table with the key, sign off person?
Right. And do they have the authority to sing your praises internally? Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. It's great to have people that you have connection with, but do they have power?
And do they have the ability to create a sense of urgency? One of the things that we also see is, this dynamic of, is there a need? Is it now? And is it affordable with the solution you're presenting to solve it for them? Is the value aligned with the price and with the timing, right? Like, you have to expect that whether it's a household budget or a business budget, that you are taking someone else's lunch, so to speak, at that table, and
Right.
most budgets are completely allocated. You're going to delay something later. It has been assigned to an advertising campaign. And if you're going to pull back on that ad campaign, this better be really compelling.
Yes.
So think about, how you convey a sense of urgency, because that can be one of the main reasons why someone chooses the kitchen remodel over the landscaping, over the HVAC. Think about like the consumer decision-making that's happening right now. People are upgrading their homes, but they don't have unlimited income. So what does that mean for them? Do they hire the, au pair, or do they build a fence in their yard so their kids can go run around with you keeping a, sort of side eye on them? people are making these decisions every day in business and in life. I lost you for a second.
Gosh.
Oh, there you are. You always come right back. Sorry,
It's
folks.
like goes out for a minute.
For a second and we miss her.
Yes. And I'm probably frozen in fun faces too. So you're welcome.
No, you're fine. No funny faces. Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. During the discovery process, so I think of that as just asking questions. Why do you want to remodel your kitchen? What don't you like about it? And getting to understand the root of the pain. Do they just not like the color? Or is the sink in that position causing them to not be able to cook dinner as quickly, or not have enough counter space that, really bothers them every day? You got to unearth that pain and sometimes create it, and then point back to it when you're driving urgency. All right. How long do you want to go with your sink like that? Right. And then that can help that, guide somebody down that decision-making process. If it's a fence and an au pair, well, what's driving those decisions? And if you're going with one or the other, what are you losing out on? And how is that going to affect your life? And how can you point to that in the sales process to help create that urgency where they're thinking about how much they don't want their sink in that position, or whatever it might be.
Right. And sometimes envisioning, oftentimes business coaches will use this methodology, but any business can really use it, especially any salesperson, where you might craft almost a vision board for the client in a conversation where you say, like, if you have this ideal kitchen, then what does that look like for you? Like, what does dinner time really look like for you? What does breakfast look like for you, or meal prep? Like, if you have this fantasy with this ideal setup, walk me through, dinner time tonight with your kitchen set up perfectly. And really that buy-in can create a sense of, connectedness that can drive urgency, even if it is not, the most urgent need, which might be the AC so you can breathe while you're in the kitchen. So it's interesting to think about the dynamic and the controls that are, I think, and Karlie, you're sort of getting to this, the controls that are in your power if you can frame the conversation and steer it in the right way to their benefit at the end of the day, where you mutually feel like this is a good decision.
And I think something that you said really resonated with me. When you're having somebody picture something, that's storytelling. Early in my career, I learned how to sell through stories, actually my first sales job. And it's something that's resonated and stuck with me throughout my years. When you start telling someone a story, immediately they put themselves in the place of the story. When somebody tells you, my friend just won the lottery and they're buying a new home, a mansion, fun. What the first thing I think of is myself winning the lottery in a mansion, right? You put yourself there. So when you create a story, you're activating the other side of your brain, and that puts the prospect into imagining how great life is with the new kitchen. That feels emotion, and people buy off of that emotion. So being able to not just talk about the measurements and how long the counter is and what kind of tile and granite, having that vision of what do you want to do in this kitchen and how does that fuel your day-to-day life and what would perfect be to you, puts them in that place and emotionally connects them to it, which again can help drive urgency in the sale.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm thinking about a couple of things here. One, how to understand if you are also qualifying this lead while you're steering that conversation, because I think often we can get off track and we try so hard to get that sale and realize at the end of the day, wow, that was actually a really small sale. Like they ended up just buying, I don't know, a new like fake countertop, cover, right? And, you've got veneers instead of the real thing. And you're like, wow, that job wasn't worth nearly as much as I thought it was going to be. Maybe I should have asked more questions instead of just storytelling and steering them to buy the whole time. that can be a real challenge. Like, where do you insert the questions versus the, compelling story? When you are working, at least in SaaS, and there's a lot of, corollaries to other industries, how early on do you start introducing those screening questions and those filters? Where does that play out in the conversation? I think you're frozen again, but I'm sure you're going to come right back.
Am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
Okay. I think you were going down the road of methodology around qualification.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay. I'm sorry. I half missed your question. Okay. So when I approach SaaS qualification, so have you ever heard of the BANT methodology?
Yes, but let's describe it for the audience, please.
Absolutely. It's a little old school, and I recommend that anybody thinking of using this technique to actually personalize it for their own organization. I think it was created originally back in the 80s and, maybe IBM. So it's definitely a little bit farther back, but it's a really tried and true way to think about, how do I know if this person is right?
Real deal.
Right, exactly. And not from the demographic side. These are questions you've got to answer and get from them. So we talked a bit about authority already. That's the A in BANT. The B is budget, have money. The N is need. The T is time frame. So I will share, and I'm just going to stop my video for a second just so we can, internet wise. So I'll share my screen here and talk through a little bit of BANT methodology. Again, this is related to directive in itself. So I have an inbound SDR team similar to what Maddy and your company does. We have a team in-house, and really we actually kind of laid out what that looks like, what that call looks like and what that script looks like. So everything from when we're talking and qualifying a prospect, setting the agenda, introing who we are, giving social proof and talking about our process, talking a little bit about our company dynamics, and then we go into what we're actually doing. But from a BANT standpoint, what we're really looking for in here is, okay, what kind of budget do you have, and does that fit within our process? What is your authority? You can actually, kind of determine, okay, is this somebody that it has the ability to elevate us internally, has the ability to, make these decisions, or are they connected to the person that does, and how do we get to that person? What's the need, and then what's the time frame? This is there's a lot of different pieces to this doc, and it doesn't show BANT as clearly as I'd like, but I can always send something out to this group too, or share something with you, Maddy, on it. The real purpose is you want to make sure that those pieces are in place, or else your deal is at risk. If they don't have the money to buy what you're selling, well, that's usually a non-starter.
Right.
Do they have the ability to create the budget? Also a common question and thing to consider. Do they have the ability to sign or make the decision, or get you to the person that does? What is their need? How does it match what you're doing? Are you actually, are they picking up what you're putting down, and vice versa? And then time frame. A real, killer of qualification in my mind is when you say, hey, when you're trying to make a decision, and they're like, I don't know. Okay, let's back that up a little bit. Let's unpack that and really figure that out. Because there are a lot of tire kickers out there, folks that want info, folks that want to talk to you, but don't ever have an intention of purchasing. And it ends up just being a waste of time. And there are different actions you can take depending on the information from BANT that you get from them. And I always think too, as you're gathering that information, and if you feel as though, okay, wow, this does seem like a good fit. Yeah, this seems qualified. That's when you can start to create some of the pain or urgency. If it's the right person, they're in an active buying cycle, their timeline is, you know, fits into your sales cycle. Maybe it's 2 months, 3 months, whatever is your business. But maybe their need isn't as strong. You can help create that with stories, that's kind of where the storytelling comes into play there. But some of the things to note that are non-starters are budget, like I said, talking to somebody that has no power, their need is completely not what you do, and the time frame is never. There's no definitive of, you know, we're trying to make a decision. And I always ask too, is there a critical event related to that? If you want to make a decision
You're
in
running up
3
against,
months, yes, if you want to make a decision in 3 months, what happens if you don't? Right? And that's a great thing to also uncover whether this is a qualified deal or not. So that's the methodology that I use that works really well. And like I said, you can really take that and put it in a lot of different directions for your business, or add pieces to that you want to make sure that you're qualifying. And I think, you know, you guys at Smith do a great job of helping folks do that as well.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, there's a lot of questions that are sort of stemming off of this for me, but and feel free to chime in if anyone has other questions. But one of them is, how do you actually score that? Is it binary? Is it 1 to 0? Is it 0 to 10, 0 to 5, ABC? You know, am I giving them an A+ or an A- on the B, A, N, and T? How do you guys actually do that in a quantitative way?
Totally, you can score. Typically I approach it as there are some we can work with and some we can't. If you don't have the budget and I don't have the ability to do anything with the pricing,
Right.
you can't go anywhere. That's a key one that you have to have. Authority, you can play with that, right? If it's not the right person, can you ask for a referral? Can you ask for them to bring their boss in on the next call? Can you ask for an intro via email? You can work with that. Need, you can also work with, right? You can create, you can help to paint that story, create urgency. It just, you know, again, if the demographic information, that's kind of another piece we talked earlier, if that's in line, that need can be created sometimes. And same with the time frame, that's also creating urgency. I approach it as long as there's 3, you're good. But if the budget isn't in line, that can be a non-starter at times. So, and that depends per organization as well. There could be a company where you can't create a need, right? A lawyer maybe can't create a need. If somebody doesn't have the need for a lawyer, that's a pretty black or white thing, right? So it really depends on the organization. You can score it. I've seen that done. It just determines at that point what you do with it. If some of the pieces are in place, do you nurture it? Yes. Yes, right? Because maybe the time frame will be right someday, or maybe they'll get you to the right person someday, or maybe they will have the budget. So I think that depends on organization, but for me, I like to have 3 of the letters in place before saying, yes, this is qualified.
That makes a lot of sense to me. And, you know, there are some things as you're thinking about, okay, like what are the deal breakers? How do I get to those answers really early on? Maybe you have a contact form on your website. You have questions that Smith.ai can ask for you. You know, oftentimes the contact form is really underutilized, and we see name, email, phone number. How did you hear about us? If you're really like dialed in, and then a blank box to write your life story. And it's really important that you actually use that more strategically. Maybe your CRM or intake solution can embed a form on your website, or it can be a link that can go deeper into those questions. And you want to think about things that are like first line deal breakers, and then next order deal breakers, or nice to have. So, or even priority pathways. So what I mean there is, if you have a drop down for how you hear about us, and it's a referral partner who 9.5 times out of 10 is sending you a great client, you might skip them to the front of the line and they don't need to be bogged down by a ton of questions that are only going to create friction in your sales cycle, which will reduce sort of the conversion rate. There might be people who are outside of your service area. They are categorically from a site that sends you 9.5 out of 10 tire kickers. And you're like, they get the automated workflow, not the hands-on follow-up, because they're very likely not to be qualified, and you want to maybe refer them out to someone where they're a better client for that other business. And you might actually make more money and spend less time from a referral fee if your business or industry allows that, than actually spending any time with them. And you can provide a lot of service in giving them the direction to the right service provider instead of them having to go back to Google, right? So you could even get, let's say, a 5-star review on Google for like, wow, they actually referred me to the company I ended up hiring. Great, there's no complaints there, right? You ended up not working with someone who is going to be wasting your time and dragging you along. But there are some sort of hard and fast things beyond budget. Like if you're only working in a certain service area, if you are doing a kitchen remodel and you can't, if you're in Buffalo, New York, and you can't go to Toronto, Canada, you're literally not going to be able to take that job, even though maybe during other times you would have traveled up there, right? So you really have to think about like, what are the must-haves, as Karlie is saying, and then what are the things that are nice to have where you can be flexible. Maybe you can break out the total cost into multiple payments if that's more digestible. Hey, is there anyone who can help you with this payment? Is there anyone who can go in on it with you? Or some of the payment, options right now where you can get financing on things that you never could get financing on before, actually, like legal and financial services and things like that. So, there are some creative ways to get around that. You don't want to spread people too thin, of course. But when it comes then to sort of the time frame and the buying cycle, all right, so you've figured out this person is a pretty well qualified lead. I have the right people in place. I have the right conversations coming up. I know how to pitch this and sell it. I understand where they came from and how ready they are based on that. And then they're still not moving forward, or I can't determine what's making them move forward or not. And they get into sort of this like nurture cycle. One of the things that we see is there's not enough follow-up and people stop too early. But I'm really interested to know from your side, Karlie, what are some of the misconceptions or missteps that people make in the nurturing process?
Oh, that is a great question. Nurturing is key, and I don't think folks prioritize it enough. Back to earlier when we were speaking, sometimes people aren't in a buying cycle, and that's common. You don't buy, except for maybe groceries and clothes, you don't buy things frequently, right? There are services, especially for the value amount. I don't need an HVAC service. Well, maybe I need it yearly, right? Or maybe I'm looking at one point in a 5-year period for a provider that I can trust and have with me for a longer period of time.
Mm-hmm.
Nurturing to me is about providing value consistently over a period of time. So when the time is right, you're the first thought for that particular prospect. But it has to resonate and speak to them. And if possible, have a personal touch. I have my SDRs help through the nurture process, particularly for higher value clients of ours that might be in that tier 1 that we talked about. And we actually position some of the messaging as, hey, Bob, I found this webinar. I know we
Karlie, you're frozen again. Hopefully you're going to come right back.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Sorry, my internet, I think it's the webinar, but regardless.
It's okay.
So what I was saying was it's important to build trust in that nurture process and not actually have a call to action for that prospect. You're
Mhm.
giving, but you're not asking them for anything.
Not
And
every conversation should have an ask. Yes.
correct, because asking every time, right, can
Mhm.
look like your only goal is to sell something for your organization.
Right.
But your goal isn't only just that, it's to build trust. Gives help create trust with no asks. So I like to use that as well as personalization when possible.
That makes a ton of sense to me. Now, just to close this out, sometimes what happens is as you've been working on this new client, whether an individual or a business, you've now created demand so effectively that they think, all right, I'm ready to buy. I have my boss at the table. And my boss asked me in seeing this proposal that I thought was ready to sign, who else did you evaluate? And then
Whew.
you have the competitors who are on the table necessarily because it's good due diligence. Your
Yeah.
boss said you better, show me that this is well researched and we know how they play out, among the different options on the market. Testimonials obviously play a really strong role here. And I think
Sure.
oftentimes we don't collect and distribute references unless asked, and sometimes proactively sharing those and saying, please get in touch with this person. They'll corroborate, the things that I've told you about your experience with this business that you will
Yep.
have when you sign on. But how do you get past that common, especially these days with access at your fingertips to all the online review sites? How do you get past that competitive sort of part of the conversation as a hurdle that's going to happen most of the time? I can't hear you, but
So you
yep. Okay.
mentioned two things that are crucial: social proof as
Mhm.
well as having references. So references, I think, are key here. And to your point, being able to offer them instead of waiting for somebody to ask is a really interesting thing to think about and consider, right? So instead of waiting for somebody to say, hey, I want to talk to someone you've worked with, invite them to reach out to somebody that you've worked with, especially, of course, your better clients, as well as having social proof, those customer quotes at the ready, those case studies, and having a lot of them that you
Mhm.
can support your client with, and
Mhm.
understanding what's the decision criteria. How are
Mhm.
you making the decision? And that will help you to determine what you need to do to make sure that you're winning, right? That particular competitive type sale,
Mhm.
really diving down and figuring out, are you just doing due diligence or did you see something that you don't like? Can help
Mhm.
you figure out where this is going to go. And
Mhm.
that can be a real key part in determining what that competitive strategy might look like.
Yeah, so that's a really good point. Are they looking for alternatives? Have they had a bad experience in the past and they're actually switching so they're more educated on the pitfalls of going with the wrong service provider or software? And what are the sort of main points of the conversation that you have to hit as targets because you understand that's where the sensitivity lies? So when you're qualifying, those clients, asking them, have you ever worked with a service or a software company like ours before?
Right.
That's also really important as a reference point. So
Yes.
then why, did you discontinue working with them? If you don't mind sharing, can give you a lot of information to leverage then and later on.
Absolutely. That's a really great point. And understanding how they make decisions for software or whatever it is. What is that decision-making process? What did it look like the last time you bought a tool?
Right.
Help you determine where the roadblocks might be that you got to be prepared for.
And did you just outgrow it or did you actually have a complaint? Because that often happens too, especially with all of the software options or service options that are out there. Is it DIY? Is it white glove? Is it expensive? Is it low feature, et cetera, no
You have
matter which.
onboarding help, right?
Right,
You pay
right.
for that. Client services, is there even a team there? So many pieces to dive into that can really help you determine.
Yeah, and you might ask, depending on, what is required when you're working with someone from your business, do you need them to have someone technical, or are you going to have
Yeah,
to, make sure that you can supply that on your business side of things? We know one of the things at Smith AI that we often do is help people forward their calls, because in our small business owner audience, they're not going to have dedicated IT, and that's not something
right,
they look at every day. So are you going to supply it if they don't have it in-house? If
right.
not, how do you bridge that gap? Do you have a network of consultants, et cetera? It gets a little bit complicated if you don't have that immediate sort of magnets click, right? Um, so, I want to give you a little bit of time, Karlie, for the next, few minutes to the top of the hour to just share, a little bit about Directive. Obviously, you're a very impressive person, and where you work has got to be impressive too. I happen to know that. We really love Directive, and I would love to just have you share a little bit about Directive services so people can know if they'd like to get in touch with you to learn more.
Let's hope everybody can hear me on
Yes,
this video.
I will tell you if they
Seem
can.
to be okay, but when I start talking, I guess my internet can't handle my face and my voice today. I do work for Directive Consulting. You can Google us. We are a performance marketing agency. We specialize in B2B SaaS, but we have also worked with B2C clients as well. Happy to have those conversations. We do focus on essentially generating leads for organizations through search engine optimization, through paid media campaigns, your Google ads, your paid social campaigns, LinkedIn sponsored content, Facebook ads, as well as through performance creative, graphic design. We do videos, product videos, demo videos, and we are very shortly also launching 2 new business units, conversion rate optimization,
There you
which is
go.
very fruitful for this conversation. Essentially, what's the conversion path look like on your site so that
Mhm.
it's easy for folks to contact you, and also marketing operations, which is, I think, huge, not only in SaaS, but in so many businesses. How do you unpack attribution and lead scoring and all of those pieces within there? So, if anybody would love to learn more, check out our site. You can also reach out to me, find me on LinkedIn, send me a message. Love to grow my network. I would love to chat with you about any and all things, whether it be related to Directive or related to the webinar. I am more than happy to chat with you. And yeah, I'm so happy to be on today and get to chat more with you, Maddy.
Yeah, you too, Karlie. Thank you so much. If anyone has questions, feel free to send them in. If you send them to me, I will connect you with Karlie. And I really encourage you to check out their website. It's a wide range of services that are really applicable to both B2B and B2C services. As Karlie mentioned, their sweet spot, is in SaaS, but we had experience with them that was fantastic. And we're not SaaS in the traditional sense. Yes, we have a lot of foundation in SaaS, but we are a service provider. So I think we relate a lot to our client base in that respect, of service businesses, home, professional, you name it. So go ahead and check them out a little bit more. They also have fantastic content. They have a great podcast by their CEO, and who had the joy of being on and eating sour
Yeah,
candy. Yeah.
Maddy ate
And
some sour candy. Please watch it.
it's an experience. Harder to talk with the sour candy in your mouth than actually to eat the sour candy itself, as I learned. But anyway, please do reach out. And if there's anything that I can do for you, or if Smith AI can help you in the process of, generating demand and leads, and then having us follow up and carry those conversations through for you to engage those leads, we'd be happy to. As you know, our website is smith.ai, and we'd love to chat with you. Just email us hello@smith.ai, or live chat with us on our website. So everyone, thanks for joining us. Karlie, thank you for being here. Really appreciate your time and your insights. Absolutely invaluable. And I know everyone is going to walk away feeling a lot stronger and better prepared here.
Thank you. And I do have as well templates on a lot of these topics. We also share them on our LinkedIn. So if you ever are trying to do a TAM or you want to learn more about BANT, reach out. I have stuff to help you. You don't need to recreate the wheel.
Fantastic. That's so generous. Wonderful. We'll check Directive out on LinkedIn and contact Karlie for those templates. I can't find any reason why you wouldn't go and start, hit the ground running. So everyone take care. Have a great rest of your afternoon.
Thank you. Bye,
Bye.
everybody.